you. Good evening. The hour being after 6:45 p.m., it is my high honor and privilege to call the January 27th, 2022 school committee meeting to order. Our first order of business is the salute of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome and good evening, everyone. We have a packed agenda this evening. Our next order of business is our Walpole High School student report. The chair will call upon Grace Ryan. Representative Ryan, please take it away.
Good evening, I'm Grace and I'm a junior at the high school. These last couple weeks have been very busy for students as we approach the end of the first semester on Friday, January 21st. Students wrapped up their semester-long classes, with many classes having finals. This Monday, the second semester began and students were excited to start new semester-long classes, especially if they were beginning a study. WHS students are busy as ever as they are fully involved in schoolwork, sports, and clubs. Notably, seniors who applied to college have begun to hear from schools and are excited for their futures. Last week marked the halfway point of the winter sports regular seasons. This year, all teams have seen remarkable success, and congratulations to all. Notably, the girls' basketball team is at the top of their league. Last week, the girls' track team set 2 school records in the 4x50 relay and the 4x200 relay, with the same team participating. The 4x200 time also qualified them for nationals. Clubs have not allowed rising COVID cases over the past few weeks to inhibit their activities. Many clubs met virtually after winter break, but are now back meeting in person and are busy as ever. Speech and Debate continues to attend meets, including last weekend's Lexington Winter Invitational, where the team saw great success. Also, Mock Trial competed in their first meet on Tuesday, and other clubs continue to plan activities and fundraisers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Ryan. Questions or comments from Ms. Ryan? Mrs. Gallivan.
Just want to comment, we are in the presence of greatness. This girl is a starter on the basketball team, and Grace is one awesome basketball player. If you get a chance, this year's team is fantastic. It's worth taking a look at. But yeah, to be a starter on that team is pretty amazing, so congratulations, Grace.
Thank you.
Thank you. Grace, when's your next game?
Tomorrow.
Excellent. Get it in before the snow.
Yep.
We wish you luck and look forward to your next report. Hopefully you have a really good season continued good season to report back on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
You know Mary Lou Jennings?
Yes.
I'm her godfather. Her father's one of my childhood best friends, so.
Great stuff.
Oh, fun.
Small town. All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Ryan. Moving on, if the chair would have unanimous consent to take up item of old business, which has been a recurring item, the COVID-19 update. So no objection. Ms. Garvin?
Want me to
Wanna
start?
come on down?
Cameron, Kathy can take a seat. So this is part of my superintendent update that's rolled into the COVID update. And then Kathy Garvin, our district nurse leader, is happy to answer any questions as well. In terms of COVID cases, last week the school department had 118 cases. That's down from 201 in the prior week. So we're starting to see a downward trend, which is nice. It's interesting. I don't think I've ever been pleased to say and be happy we see 100 cases. You know, where before there were so little, but we're moving in the right direction, so that is great news. And I think as of yesterday morning, we had probably about 52 for the week, for midweek. So we're hoping that you know, is trending down and staying low, and we're confident that it is. In terms of the Walpole Health Department, the positivity rate is actually, it's down to 20%, 20.59 to be exact, and that's down from 23.78%. So again, they're starting to see this downward trend, and I think that, and we're hoping that it's gonna come down even quicker. There's a new testing update. As anticipated, DESE sent out another update. And I sent an email out earlier this week about the new COVID testing program option. So on January 18th, Governor Baker and DESE Commissioner Jeff Riley announced this COVID testing initiative. And as a result of this announcement, and in accordance with DESE and the Department of Public Health, our district is updating our COVID testing program. So school districts currently participating in test and stay programs are now eligible, both staff and students, to receive home testing kits. So this at-home testing program We'll increase the testing of our participating students and staff regardless of vaccination status. So staff and students, if they wish, they'll test 1 day a week. We decided it's Tuesday morning before coming to school. Again, this is optional. It's an opt-in. And in addition to this new at-home antigen test option, we will, this is important to note, continue with symptomatic testing and then once the students' kits are distributed, they'll be arriving actually to Town Hall sometime next week. Also, as part of the shift in the program, per DESI, once the program begins, and we think with staff's going to start next week, and then it's followed by students the following week. That's how DESI has set it up. We are continuing the test and stay and contact tracing for in-school close contacts. However, just to reiterate, we are continuing in-school symptomatic testing, and the nurses will handle those cases for students who are immune compromised on an individual basis. Again, it's voluntary, and that all families received this notice on Monday, and they also received a link on how to register. So we're tabulating that now and making sure the kits get out to the schools next week. In terms of vaccination status, the elementary schools, they're anywhere between high 40% to low 50% in terms of their vaccination rates. Boyden's at 46%, Fisher 57, Elm 54, and OPR 55. We anticipate as we tabulate some of the staff that those numbers will rise. Byrd Middle School, both Byrd and Johnson are at 65% vaccination rates, and Walpole High School is at an 84% vaccination rate. So, Kathy, anything to add?
We had a COVID booster clinic at our high school and middle schools this week, and we had about 100 people vaccinated, mostly students. A handful of staff came in and got the boosters as well, and we did have I think about 3 students actually get their first vaccine on that day as well, which was great. So that was good news.
Anything
Okay.
further?
No, and I'll turn it over to
Excellent. Thank you
guys.
very much. For those who've been following along with our dialogue, we've had Kathy in every meeting of ours, and Dr. Goff has been reporting both the community positivity rate as well as the cases we have amongst our student body. Last time we were here, we heard from our Board of Health, which asked us to pause moving forward at the high school, where we have received the waiver required from DESI until the positivity rate in the community reaches a 3% threshold. Obviously, as we've kind of said before, we have overlapping areas of jurisdiction. Much of this is impressed upon us by DESI, and we also work in close collaboration with the Department of Health, which also has a pretty wide scope of authority as far as public health in the public sphere here in town. There is a number of opportunities to move forward from here. One of them could be to decide to move forward with a mask optional once the high school reaches 3%, as we discussed but took no action on last time. I'm open to that. With that, I will open it up to my colleagues for further discussion. Anybody want to start? Ms. Gaotz, it's Mrs. Gallivan.
I just actually had a question on the test and stay.
Sure.
Did you say that program is discontinued or is continuing?
No, DESI says, once we do this at-home optional, you no longer are doing test and stay. But if they're symptomatic and they're not feeling well, the child can still go to the nurse, and the nurse will still do the test for the child. And if they're immune compromised, they'll handle it on an individual basis.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, do we expect, if parents are signing up for this at-home testing, is the rate, because there's a ton of people I'm sure who are asymptomatic that could be getting picked up. I'm just concerned about the 3% number. Like, if this is that contagious, I'm just not sure when we're going to get there. So in my opinion, I am not in favor of masks. I never have been. So I just am not clear that we're ever going to get there with a variant this contagious, and it's not as severe. Are you seeing severe cases across town? Because that's just not what I'm hearing.
I can't speak to what the adults are doing. I've heard, incidentally from, I actually just heard today from a friend, and this wasn't in our town, but her, son-in-law of a family member, extended family member, passed away at 35 with no known medical issues and vaccinated,
I'm
so.
talking about little kids.
Yeah,
Have you
oh,
heard of-
we're not seeing severe cases, but we're seeing kids not rebound on, like, by day 6 when they would normally come back. We're seeing a lot of people need to take longer than that shortened quarantine is asking for with symptoms, so we're seeing that.
Yeah, I've seen that and heard that, but I'm just not seeing or hearing of any really serious
No,
repercussions, and it's like.
I
at a
mentioned
certain
we had
point-
one hospitalization that occurred over the holiday break that I'm aware of.
So you're concerned like we won't get under the 3%?
I don't think we're ever getting there with this. I think this is gonna become like the flu, that it's just contagious and it's around, I mean, at least this variant. So to me, the 3% is like, really, you'd have to,
Yeah.
I just don't think we're ever getting
Yeah.
there.
And I think we're just relaying, this is also the Board of Health, just their recommendation. So another point of consideration is they're seeing that it's declining, and then next week that, that could be cut in half and that could be cut in half. But, I see your point. When you look at those positivity rates, the only time they started spiking was, mid-November.
Right.
And, we're hoping that they go down as fast as they went up. But, I see your point.
And the state rate last night, I didn't catch it today, but last evening it was down to just under 8%.
Yeah.
So that was a huge drop, and that's what they were seeing, I think, in other countries, particularly, remember, they talked about, instead of kind of coming down on a slope, it was more like a cliff, it just really dropped. So I would think that we'd see something similar as well.
And you would, I don't think at this meeting, but in our packet, but last time around, we had the positivity rate, the community positivity rate back the beginning of last calendar year, and we didn't hit north of 3% until around November. So there's much of the first part of the school year was.
And even this time, well, not in January last year, but in February last year, just as the vaccines were rolling out just for healthcare workers and the elderly, we were at, I think by the end of February, we were at 3% or less. So it went from February all the way to mid-November before we jumped up again. So I think it will drop there. I don't know if it's going to drop there in the next 2 weeks, but I think it will drop fairly quickly.
Mrs. Gallivan?
A couple of points. One is, I think that there's so many opinions out there, and we've gotten some correspondence that I just wanted to correct, because I went on the CDC website, and the CDC is, their newest guidance came out on January 13th of 2022. And the first thing they recommend is keep your schools open if you can. The second thing they recommend is people should get vaccinated. But the third thing that they recommend is that all students ages 2 and above, staff, teachers, and visitors to schools should be masked regardless of vaccination status. And, I understand the other thing that we were sent was an opinion piece from 2 doctors, and there are a variety of opinions, so it doesn't surprise me that there are doctors who might say you don't need to wear a mask, but they're not representing their institutions. And my second point is, I think that as a school district, we have a lot to be proud of for keeping our schools open, for being one of the first schools to fully open, getting everybody in last spring when, other districts were taking their time, but it's because of the collaboration that we've had. And I can't imagine voting against a recommendation of our nurses and our health department. I think that I don't have that medical expertise that they do. So, I know it's hard to be patient, but I think we're getting there. And I do think that this is not a forever thing. I want to get rid of masks too, but we're getting requests for get rid of masks for all schools, all kids. I think it's probably, in my opinion, going to be Walpole High School first, but I know it's hard to be patient, but I can't see myself voting against the recommendations of the medical people who have helped us get to this point. I guess those are my 3 points.
Mr. Ahern, then Mr. Breen, and Carrie?
It's the question about the 3%. So is the 3% a recommendation that as a school committee, we don't take a vote until it drops below? Or are we saying that 3% would be part of the waiver? So saying such that the community spread doesn't surpass 3%, then given that we have the waiver, and then at that point, the Walpole High School community would be eligible to remove masks and have unvaccinated staff highly recommended to wear them.
If memory serves, I believe the recommendation from the Board of Health was to, knowing that we had received the waiver, we applied for and received the waiver, I think 3 meetings previously now, to not utilize the waiver until such time that 3% is.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well.
So there's an option, because we have the waiver, to move forward with the waiver. There's a
Yeah.
recommendation on the table, but that's not binding law, am I correct?
Right, you can, you could go with the waiver as is, right, but, you know, or you could just, what Sean, I think what Sean was asking, could the vote be, you know, taking the recommendation of the health department to, when it goes below 3%, then it can become mask optional. And I know that we talked last time, Sean, to your point about the, you know, the time, you know, how long that would take. I did meet with Principal Imbush and Kathy to talk about that, and we are able to expedite that. We can do that very quickly. The positivity rates come out on Thursday. Once we know the positivity rates, and let's say the positivity rate is, I don't know, 2.5%, Principal Imbush will get an email out to families that day with the opt-in form. And the students, then the following Monday, those that sign up would be able to come in that Monday. So we could have the turnaround time done very quickly. We looked at it, we sat down, we met, we tried to figure out how we could expedite this so that students who fill out a form on Thursday and Friday can come in that Monday and then be able to keep up with it.
Okay. And what's the purpose of the form?
It's permission to, you have to upload your status, your vaccination status, and just permission to mask, because there will be families who are vaccinated, who may not give permission for their children to unmask. So they have to give permission to unmask.
Okay, so just trying to process that. So that would be such as, it's a kid under 18, I would assume?
Yes.
A kid that's 18 could
They would give their own permission.
provide permission.
Correct.
But because it's a health decision, we're
Correct.
saying. Okay.
Correct.
Other questions, Mr. Ahern? God bless you. Mr. Breen?
So the Boston Globe today has an interesting graphic that shows rates coming down pretty quickly and projected based on computer models, like Washington University, I guess, is pretty well respected. Continuing to plummet pretty dramatically, which is good. So I wouldn't be shocked if we're confronting this 3% threshold pretty soon. And secondly, anecdotally, it'd be interesting. I know Cohasset is mask optional. They took the masks off. They didn't put them back on after when Omicron came about. King Philip, where I am, put the masks back on, but now there's talk about within a week or two taking them off. So it'd be interesting to see what's informing other districts' policies as well, so.
Ms. Denizio?
So the first thing I want to clarify is that absent the waiver, the state mandate is in effect until February 28th.
That is
So
correct.
we can only be having this conversation about Walpole High School right now because we've received the waiver. There is no discussion to be had right now about the elementaries and the middle schools
Correct.
Well, what about preschool?
and preschool,
Right.
because that's part of our policy.
Yes, but technically preschool is not mandated, correct?
Correct. It's
Correct.
5 and up. You're correct.
Yeah, I just want to be clear.
I know that Kathy, you don't work for the Board of Health, but do we have any clarification we can provide folks about where the 3% threshold comes from? Why is that the number that our Board of Health feels comfortable with?
I think it was because that, looking back, when Melissa Ranieri, our health director, looked back, she looked at where it had started to fall off from last year. And then, as I said, like, I think it was late February, it kind of hit like 3%, and then it came down, and I do remember it was like 0.6%, like the last day of school or something like that. And I even remember a text from our public health nurse saying, oh my goodness, we don't have any active cases right now. And I remember that because 2 hours later, I texted her back and said, well, yeah, now you do. So there was like a window of no cases whatsoever. And that was the very last week of school. And then we stayed very low, as Dr. Goff has said, till mid-November, and then it started creeping up incrementally. And then, of course, just right before the holidays, it just really skyrocketed, and we had that about a month now of just, a number of cases. But as I said, the state rate has come down quickly since last week, so I think it will continue to come down. But I think that her thinking was, look how long we were at 3%. And the transmission in school was very low. From the first day of school through November 30th, we had 3 positive tests in the Test and Stay program. In the month of December, we had 10. Some of those were symptomatic. We've had 39 in January, and the majority of them were symptomatic. We've had a handful, a couple of, maybe 6 that have been Test and Stay, but the rest have all been symptomatic students.
So 3% really represents a sort of stability that
Yes.
we had achieved for several ongoing months prior to this latest surge.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So, I think I'm of the same mind of Mrs. Gallivan that to deviate wildly from that recommendation does not feel comfortable to me. But I take, Mr. Ahern's point that, 3%, do we want to be really technical, and if at next week's meeting, if we're at 3.6%, does that mean we're gonna stick very rigidly to that 3% number? I don't know, and we can have that conversation. It feels a little premature to me to be doing it at 20+%, because that's a pretty big gap. The other thing for me, I think that one of the things we have to think about is not just the severity of the illness for people who test positive, but the disruption to our schools when students, but particularly staff, test positive. Because once a staff member tests positive, it doesn't matter if they're symptomatic or not, they are out for 5 days. And that is a significant disruption in a school building. It's a significant disruption to a classroom, and then if you amplify it, if you have multiple staff out, that's very disruptive. And I think Dr. Goff could attest to, the struggles of the first couple of weeks of January to make sure everything was covered. I work in a school where on one day, 1/3 of our teaching staff was out. And, I have children who were in classes that were being covered by the principal. And from what I heard, a great time was had by all, but, our principal has other things that we need our principal to be doing. And so, I hesitate at the point we're at now to take that risk to take additional risk for our staff that are going to disrupt the core function of our buildings and the education of our kids. And I think that, as long as the protocol is, it doesn't, you're out for 5 days, that's gonna be a serious factor, I think that we need to consider. So, wanted to point that out too.
Dr. Goff and Ms. Sarek?
And I just wanted to, I know that the commissioner is saying for masks, I know this isn't the high school, but until February 28th, and I'll update you when we're gonna have, I'm sure there'll be a meeting upcoming. There will be a meeting that, through DESI with just those high schools that reach the 80% to get more information on some procedures. And I believe that the town administrator, Jim Johnson, he's still requiring masks in all town buildings until further notice. So when that changes, I'll let you know.
Ms. Sarek?
So I just wanted to clarify something that you said, Bill, and then that Sean sort of echoed. We could vote tonight to say, once we hit 3%, we're going mask optional.
At
We
the
don't
high
have to wait until we hit that point.
Correct.
Okay.
I guess I would just echo, does that kind of tie our hands? And so, 2 weeks from now, we're at 4.2%, and we don't have a discussion because we've already kind of decided that 3% is it.
No, I don't think so, because, I mean, any motion can be revisited, especially because this is a piece of old business that is gonna be on, and we'll obviously also look at and get reports about the middle and elementary school vaccination rates as well. So, a possible path forward would be to vote to utilize the waiver obtained for the high school once 3% community positivity is reached, and empower the high school to move forward at that point. But that does not limit the body from looking at it if we're at 4.5 on February the 10th, for example. Mr. Breen?
I would make a motion to do that. I don't quite know how to phrase it, but I would make a motion to do that. Set in
Excellent.
order, moving to mask optional when we hit 3%.
Of that,
Set in motion.
You have to-
for fully vaccinated students, that's,
I believe the way DESI's recommendations are, it's mask optional, period, at this point.
And that's a choice of the school committee. Some districts
Right.
are still doing mask optional for vaccinated students only, although it's highly recommended, DESI highly recommends that unvaccinated students still mask at the high school for those
Right.
schools going mask optional, and that's part of our discussion.
I think the
with
thing
DESI.
is that you don't want to be sort of attaching sort of a scarlet letter
Correct. And
to all
hence
the students.
Hence the permission slip. We have to do permission slips
Right.
in order for, because there will be students who, when I've talked to other superintendents at those high schools, everybody's still masked, that there are students who are vaccinated that did not get permission to remove their mask. Now, the next time we meet, we might not get under this 3% this week or next week, right? We know that. We're not gonna get under 3% next week. But depending on, and you know how DESI changes their guidance or changes some of their recommendations, it may be that this body votes for, like, I'm just saying vaccinated students now, and next time that might change. I think to Kristen's point or Carrie's point that each time you come, you can modify your policy, correct? So it may change by that time, but just to let, when you do vote for that, we'll be ready.
Mr. Breen, do you want to clarify your
I
motion?
would, I'm not quite certain now. So I guess I'll go for the more conservative option. I'd like to make a motion to go mask optional for vaccinated students, should we hit the 3% threshold. And then we can revisit that in 2 weeks if we need to.
Okay. Does the chair hear a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Breen, second by Ms. Syrick. Discussion on the motion, Mrs. Gallivan.
I feel strongly that I want to hear from the people that have brought us to this point. I think that Kathy's here, but we don't have Melissa Ranieri. I think we need, I feel really strongly that I don't want to disrupt the collaboration, and I don't see that there would be anything wrong with saying we entertained this discussion tonight. We want the Department of Health to weigh in, so before we vote, but I'm going to vote against this for that reason.
Ms. Gail Titz.
Ms. Dennett, your hand
Mrs.
up
Dennett,
next.
I'm sorry, I can't, I hate this.
I feel that we really haven't had much of a discussion about having different rules based on vaccination status. I would like to hear more, I think, about, what we recommend from what our health officials recommend and what is enforceable, what our staff feels is enforceable at the high school. I would like to hear more about how the information is going to be distributed among teachers and what teachers' responsibility is to enforce the policy, what steps might be taken if students are not complying with the policy, I would feel more comfortable having some of that information in hand, because I think, you know, Mark's raised a good point. Is it for, you know, vaccinated versus for everybody? And we want to be careful about, you know, how those, we're kind of making these lines of demarcation. So I think I'm in agreement with Mrs. Gallivan. I don't really feel prepared to move forward with this evening. But that's not to say that I don't think we can get there very, very soon. I don't think we're there tonight.
Further comments, Ms. Electives?
I'm in support of the motion. I would go further, but I don't think we're gonna all agree on that. I just have a problem with as much deference as I give you. I don't think Walpole's a unique community in the sense that we need an individual 3% here. What if a different community comes up with 5%? I just have a hard time understanding, just based upon historical numbers, that 3% is the number. Your explanation, I understand where it came from. I just don't agree with it. I think we have a state that we put in a position to come down with rules. The rule is that, and we told everybody, get vaccinated so you don't have to wear these masks. I think that was kind of misleading if we're gonna change the rules down the road. So people got vaccinated with the understanding it was driving towards removing the masks at the high school. So I'm just about consistency across the state, more so than each individual health department coming up with their own numbers. If Walpole was unique in some way, maybe I'd feel differently, but you know, we're close to other communities. I'd be curious to hear what, was it Cohasset you said? Which was the neighbor, the?
Cohasset is mask optional. They're
So
not.
to me,
yeah.
that is so interesting, and I'd love to hear how that's working.
Part of it is too, communities like that have like 94, 97% vaccination rates too, so.
Yeah, Hopkinton, I'll find out. I know Franklin is 4%. And Milford does have a town positivity rate threshold, and I can find out what that number is.
I think Medway may be 2.
2, yeah. Medway, I'm sorry, Medway, you're right.
Ms. Eric?
I thought the way the waiver was worded did say for vaccinated students.
It is, but on January 10th, the guidance is that it's highly that they are highly recommending for districts that reach the 80% waiver that the unvaccinated students continue to wear masks.
Further questions or comments? Mr. Ahern?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of thoughts. I'll see if I can articulate them all into something. But I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is the decisions that the district has made with, you know, the test and stay, and that puts a lot of emphasis on the families being mindful, not that they shouldn't have already been mindful, but mindful on what they're doing and their responsibility in the contact tracing process, and knowing, you know, that vaccinations are important. And also with the last decision to do the, you know, the testing at home, the preventive testing, I guess, you know, that puts a lot of emphasis on parents and staff to be responsible at home, to be conducting those tests. And I think those things are important next steps as we, you know, merge on how we're exiting, you know, the pandemic and whether we're entering an endemic, which, you know, is a key word for the day, where COVID just becomes like the flu and it's always there, and, you know, hopefully the Omicron is kind of the last variant, and, you know, we expect not as severe cases to be the norm, similar to the flu. But overall, it's putting a lot of responsibility on the parents, not that there isn't any on the school, but I think if we're giving the parents the power and the authority and, you know, asking them to do the testing, I think it's only right that, you know, where we have the opportunity for now, we would give them the opportunity to decide whether their high school student should wear a mask. And I would subscribe to the way that the memo was written on the 10th, that, you know, it is absolutely 100% optional for vaccinated students, but also, you know, highly recommended for unvaccinated students and staff. Again, we've kind of put a lot of things in the parents' plate, and if that's truly the direction we're going, then I think this makes sense as a step of faith for us, that the community is going to continue to be responsible, that they're going to be motivated to get vaccinated, to stay healthy, to be smart, and keep your kid at home if they're not sick. I mean, that should be in every day, every school year rule, no matter what. It's not responsible to send a sick kid into school. So I think that's my thought. I also think about the staff and the burden. I don't want my students, teachers in the high school having to take mask attendance during every class. That seems unnecessary. Their role is to educate and not to be a police of the masking and just how that works, how that list gets out, how that stays confidential. Because if we are saying that this is a health decision, then there's HIPAA laws that govern that, and there's limits to who has the ability to have eyes on that and where that document travels, where it's located. There's software programs that can't even handle that because they're not HIPAA compliant. So, I don't know. That's another thing that's circulating in my mind. I do like the 3%. I think having a number like that is helpful because it shows what our community's up to, and that flows into our schools. And a school is a much more congested place than we are right now. 25 to 30 students sitting in one place for a long period of time. It's not like walking around a supermarket. You're basically in each other's air for that whole time. You can't walk around. There's as much circulation as can handle, which we have good circulation per Mike's previous explanations, which is great. But you are just kind of sitting there, so it's not like people would experience even in an office where there's just a lot of space between everybody. So that's a lot of thoughts. I don't know exactly what I'm
and a
thinking.
word. Let's not forget we did get a new word as well. Ms. Anita, then Mrs. Gallivan.
Yeah, I want to challenge the idea that the changes to the test and stay program are us as a district deciding to give more responsibility and more authority to families. The changes to the test and stay program are coming from DESE, and it's essentially an acknowledgement that with the surge in the numbers, the previous iteration of the program was untenable and was putting too much burden on staff and was impossible for our nurses to maintain while also providing the necessary standard of care for the kids in our schools. DESE, in my opinion, has never committed the appropriate amount of resources for a testing program that is effective, but that's another discussion that's out of our purview right now. To me, this has never been about trusting families or not trusting families, or us giving or taking power away. It's been about trying to keep our schools open as consistently as we can for our kids and giving them as much normalcy as we can. And masks, while not normal, and certainly nothing anybody wants to continue longer than we absolutely have helped us maintain a broader sense of normalcy for our kids by letting them go to school every day. And as Dr. Goff has mentioned in the past, with the exception of a very, very brief period of time at Daniel Feeney last year, our schools have stayed open. And so I just think that, yes, the circumstances are changing. Yes, we have to be flexible. We have to be able to pivot. We have to be able to look at the data in front of us and do what we think is best for the kids. But I just think we have to remember and honor the decisions we've made over the past 2 years that have gotten us to this place. And it's been by being thoughtful and listening to the input of everybody. And we're all tired of this. We're all tired of it. It doesn't mean we need to change the game plan away from kind of thoughtful consideration. And I'm not accusing anybody here of being not thoughtful. Certainly not. But you know, I think we wanna, at the end of the day, make a decision that feels like we did it because we knew we could back it up with data and, you know, what we know to be efficient and effective, and not just out of fatigue from this situation.
Thank you, Mrs. Gallivan.
All of this is making me think, and I still am concerned about voting for this tonight, because I would want to know some of these answers, like, how are we going to implement this? I mean, if we vote to do it tonight, we're basically telling the administration, do it however you can. Like, because we're not asking, are there consequences for kids who take their masks off? And maybe we want to give that authority to the administration, and, you know, and they can figure it out how they want to. But I think that, like, is it a manageable system for the teachers? I don't know. And I don't really wanna, pass the buck and say, okay, figure it out, and then have the staff say, we can't figure it out. Like, there's no fair way to figure it out. And I just don't see the urgency in voting on it tonight. I don't know how, like when Sean brought up the HIPAA laws, or the list, you know, we get a list of kids whose parents have given them permission. You know, do we have the software that can share it in a confidential way? I would hope we do, but it's never been needed before, so I don't know if we do. To me, I just don't see the reason that we have to vote on it tonight, considering our positivity rate is where it is.
Mr. Breen and Mrs. Gaelsitz.
So just anecdotally, King Philip, the day after we came back from school break, we had about 25% student absenteeism, over 10% staff absenteeism. This week, I would say attendance is pre-COVID normal for students, and I don't know of any teachers that are out with COVID.
Ms. Gaelsitz.
So given that I hear there's a majority of us who are interested in taking some action, but I do share some of Nancy's concerns in terms of HIPAA laws and passing problems on to the administration, I would propose a substitute motion that mirrors the language Sean read from the motion, or from the memo from, was it DESE, that makes it, that there, for the vaccinated individuals, I guess for everybody, it's optional, and then we don't have to police it. If we make it optional, or follow the exact language that you said, that it was highly recommended, there's no obligation then for the administration to police anything. You leave it on the kids to wear the mask or not wear the mask if they're not vaccinated, and then you've avoided all the problems associated with it. So I would just mirror the exact language to avoid all the problems.
We have a motion on the floor, which we're debating. We have a friendly substitute motion. Mr. Breen, would you care to amend your motion, or would you like to proceed as?
No, I have my motion, Jen has hers, I don't know if she gets a second, that becomes a substitute, doesn't it, or we vote?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So a second to Ms. Gaeltitz's motion.
Does the second include the 3%?
Oh, I would be fine with the 3%. I mean, I don't personally totally agree with it, but I don't think we're getting past that, so I'm fine including the 3%. But I'm just trying to get rid of the obligation to be policing if we desire to go that direction.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would second.
I have a motion by Ms. Gaeltitz, second by Mr. Ahern, for the substitute motion to proceed with our waiver at the high school in mirroring the current DESE guidelines as articulated by Mr. Ahern. Dr. Goff or Mr. Ahern, would you like to just state them for the record? Anybody who has it in front of me, as I don't.
Yeah, the masks would be optional for all students that have been fully vaccinated, or vaccinated, and or staff and students that have been vaccinated, and it would be highly recommended for all staff and students that have not been vaccinated.
So to be clear, like that's what that letter says. It says as of, this was dated January 10th, as of October 15th, which we know if a school demonstrates a vaccination rate of 80% or more of all students and staff in the school through the form that we submitted, which was, we know that was accepted, then the mask requirement would no longer be in effect for that school building. Whether or not a school district avails themselves of the 80% vaccination off-ramp is a local decision to be made by school and district leaders in consultation with local health officials. In alignment with statewide guidance, this is the change, it is highly recommended that unvaccinated students and staff continue to wear masks. The department will continue to work with medical advisors to explore other metrics to inform further off-ramps for masks. That's the,
So it would be a recommendation for
Rather than a
unvaccinated
requirement.
students instead of us having to enforce it.
Yeah.
I think that gets
Mrs.
out of the
Gallaudet?
problem.
I'm wondering if either Kathy or Bridget have a recommendation for us.
I think, I'm just looking at the last recommendation by the Board of Health that was recommending the 3% for vaccinated students. That's the last one I have. They haven't changed their stance. I am having a meeting tomorrow morning with DESE, with all high schools who have reached the 80% vaccination threshold due to this language specifically, so we can discuss the language that's in here. So, we know how things change from week to week. I mean, this may change again, and we're back here, but this is the language that it is now. The language, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, from the Department of Health, the Board of Health, is 3%, they're recommending 3%, under 3% for vaccinated individuals. Third, I've collected all the permission slips, just about all the permission slips from all the schools who have gone, who have reached the 80% and have sent out permission slips. So I have those and collected those, and that's what Stephen and Bush, myself, and Kathy Garvin worked on to make sure that they align, and I've spoken with those superintendents about those permission slips that were put out.
And there isn't any medical information on the permission slip that would be shared with any teachers? It was specifically written that only the school administrator and the nurses would know about a vaccination status, which through FERPA, which is, often takes primary in a school setting, administrators can access any child's health record in a school setting because it is a school setting, so FERPA would take over. But they're the only person in the school other than the nurse that can access that without specific written permission. But in this case, they would have permission because that was the question that Dr. Goff specifically put on there. But that information wouldn't go to a teacher, and it would just be permission, as Dr. Goff said. I would say, from a nursing standpoint, what we hear from parents is it's equal. As many parents would like to take the masks off, there are just as many parents who would like to keep them on and have concerns that they might be coming off. So we're hearing from both sides. So it's a hard decision.
Mr. Breen?
We have a substitute motion on the floor, am I correct?
Correct, we're now debating the substitute motion.
Okay, very good.
Mrs. Gallagher?
I just wonder, do you have any opinion on the idea of everybody can take their masks off? Like, that's what the substitute motion is about. Do you have an opinion on that, either of you?
I wouldn't advise it right now when we're so high. I think at 3%, it's better. As a nurse who has a public health lens from VNA and community health, as well as school nursing, I would advocate for people to be, until we move into the fully endemic stage, to stay masked. It's hard, though, because then I walk around the high school and a lot of the times, this is what I'm seeing, and that's not really masks, so, it's hard, and, we can't, it is difficult on the teachers to police that, and I am worried about that piece of it, so it's
And in
a
my,
hard choice.
I support the Board of Health. When our Board of Health is making this recommendation, I do have the faith and the trust in them. They've done, yeoman's work and have supported us. Now, they may say in 2 weeks, it should be mask optional for vaccinated and unvaccinated. Right now, they're saying vaccinated, and then, and I appreciate, both Sean and Jen talking about, these permission slips and having to do all this work and getting all of that in. We'll have that system set up, and, talking with other superintendents of how they were able to do this, what went well for them, what they would have done differently next time. I think that's something that we can benefit from those districts who reached the 80% before us, and got those slips out. So I know KP, was one of them. Franklin, I think Franklin only had them out for a few days, and then they went back on. Medway was another one, Cohasset. These are the districts that I've talked to. And I'll be fortunate to be able to talk with all of them tomorrow morning.
And I think if I had my druthers, I'd rather have everybody stay masked until you could take them off altogether, but I think I realize that's not realistic. And the CDC still does say that kids should remain masked, and staff in school settings. So,
Mr. Breen, Ms. Sarek?
No, I'm not.
Ms. Sarek?
So I have two questions. If the motion is nobody needs to wear a mask, does that eliminate the need for a permission slip?
If no one needs to wear a mask, then yes, the permission slips would not go out, because once we hit the 80% threshold and we're under 3%, then you're correct. There would be no permission slips. So if parents wanted their child to wear, just the same before, permission slip or no permission slip,
Okay.
And that's what I asked, what Kathy said, with some of these schools, I was wondering, was there an issue with students' permission not have mask, unvaccinated mask? But they said there were a number of students who did not have permission to take off masks.
And then what do we think the chances are, Kathy, realistically, that we're gonna hit 3% before we meet again in 2 weeks?
in 2 weeks, I don't think Walpole will get to 3% in 2 weeks, but
Maybe
maybe
in
by the
3
next
weeks?
meeting after that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. And it might be in between there, so,
Right.
based on last night, the state being at 8%, that makes me think it's gonna drop pretty rapidly.
And when's our next meeting?
On the
Our
10th.
next meeting is the
Yeah.
10th of February.
So I'm kind of feeling like if there's a very, 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 very tiny chance that we would get to 3% before we meet, so we would need to put this plan into place. And you're having a meeting, Dr. Goff, tomorrow to get more information on this. Maybe it's best to just kind of punt.
The good thing is that these positivity rates come out Thursday, which helps us with school committee. But if by chance it were to go down for some, wonderful reason that it goes down to 3% on the 10th, and if it was a vote of vaccinated, we could get those permission slips out that night and have these kids come in, mask optional, on Monday. We could turn it around.
And maybe we could ask Melissa Ranieri to update her recommendations.
Recommendations. Or at that vote, it may be that we get more information, and as Jen mentioned, that, it's mask optional, just mask optional, 2.2. And we could bring, and what Nancy has mentioned, if you want to bring Melissa in, we could request that she come to the meeting.
Further question? Ms. Denizio?
I feel like we all are trying to go in the same direction at slightly different speeds, and I think we all see the finish line ahead of us, and we all definitely want to be there right now. So I'm reassured. I feel like there's not a huge philosophical disagreement here. There's not a huge chasm that needs to be breached, or I don't know if that's the right word, but like it's just a question of how close are we, how fast do we need to go. A lot of the questions that have been raised and the things that I know are coming up and the numbers that we see today makes me think that there's no need to rush, that we are almost there and that we are going to get there pretty soon. So I still believe that it's not necessary to enact any change tonight. But I'm reassured because a lot of what I hear makes me think that we are close and we are going to get there very, very soon.
Further questions or comments from the committee on the substitute motion? Seeing none, the chair will call the question on the substitute motion. All those in favor? Opposed? 4. Substitute motion fails. Mr. Breen's motion. Chair will call the question. All those in favor?
Could we restate?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Mr. Breen, would you like to restate your motion?
I'll allow you to do it.
Excellent. I will try to read my notes then. Mr. Breen's motion is to utilize the waiver accepted by, sought by the district for the high schools having received 80%, but utilizing that once the community positivity rate, thank you for helping me along, the community positivity rate reaches 3%.
And for vaccinated
Or
students.
vaccinated individuals.
Right, and that's the difference.
That's the difference.
Right.
Correct.
We're saying absolutely no mask off for unvaccinated students and staff.
Correct.
In this motion.
In this motion.
Okay.
Chair will call the roll. Chair will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries 4-3. Excellent. Moving on, we have history curriculum update. Mr. Donahue.
Evening, everybody.
Good evening. We had a good Robert's Rules example here, so we're follows well in.
It's good to join everybody today. I've got a few things to talk about for social studies 6 through 12 in the district. And the first thing I wanted to do is just sort of provide a big picture on the curriculum updates that we've been in the middle of for a few years. In 2018, the state came out with the updated social studies frameworks. And after a long year of meetings that Dr. Goff and Mr. Hahn were a part of, trying to figure out how to implement those changes, we came up with a rolling plan that we are getting close to the end of. So in the 2019-2020 school year, we implemented the curriculum changes in 6th through 8th grade. And from that point on, we followed is still in the process of following the 8th grade class through high school to implement the changes to the high school core courses. So in 2020-21 year, we implemented the new world history curriculum. This year, we are implementing the new sophomore United States history curriculum, and next year is going to be the biggest of the changes at the high school. We're going to have the U.S. and the modern world class beginning for juniors in the fall, and that will bring us to the end of our phased roll-in of the curriculum. I thought it would be good to bring some instructional highlights. It has not been easy to overhaul the curriculum in the middle of all of these changes that have been taking place over the last couple of years. So I thought it would be nice to bring some instructional highlights of things our teachers are really proud of and students have really been engaged in. One thing that's been taking place in our 6th grade classes is an emphasis on historical perspective taking. And while this has been something that we've been doing for a while, recent MCAS data from our middle school ELA test has told us that this is something that our students struggled with. And so the social studies department is trying to support that by embedding it more consistently and more frequently in our instructions. One of the things that has taken place is composing historical narratives. And when students learn about the Silk Road, they are composing a narrative as someone who has traveled along the Silk Road and all the different places and all the different people and all the different goods and things that they would encounter along the way. So we've, this year I think really tried to support some of the areas in ELA that we can to support them. In 7th grade, one really nice change is that there has been more of an emphasis on South and East Asian history, and particularly India has been much more emphasized than it was in the past. One of our middle school teachers put together a website that helps guide her students through their unit on India, where she's embedded videos. She has essential questions, links to textbook readings, links to articles in the news, really providing her students with a lot of resources to engage with both in class and outside of class. And as a whole, the 7th grade teachers have tried to have more student research and project choice take place in their classrooms, where the teachers will teach them sort of the big picture ideas of a topic or an era or a place, and then allow them to dig a little bit more deeply in one particular area. And that is a picture of Ms. Goldman's India website that I have up there. One of the big highlights for the high school this year has been the running of our CP1 semester-long elective African American Studies. This is something that we worked on last year to create, and Ms. Rafferty spent a long time this summer planning and putting together, and this first semester was the first time that the course ran. It is very much research and project-based, where students get choice on assignments, and being the first time that this class is run, Ms. Rafferty's really wanted to include student input on topics of study. And as they're going through certain topics and their questions lead them down one path or another, she's asked, is this something that you want to learn more about? And then has worked to either develop units, develop projects, develop assignments, or curate readings so that student interest can really guide where the course is going. To sort of summarize the big picture of the course, there's a focus on identity, there's a focus on history, and there's also a focus on contemporary issues. And when incorporating some of the student interest this year, if we're looking at the historical component of it, the development of slave culture was one thing that the students were really interested in, that Ms. Rafferty took the course in that direction. And one of the contemporary issues that the class wanted to learn more about was the current situation and history of mass incarcerations. So we're really excited that this has just wrapped up its first semester. Big success, and we're hoping we can have it come back again next year, maybe with students knowing what the course is. That word of mouth usually helps enrollment. Last year it only existed on a piece of paper. Now students can actually talk to somebody who's taken the class and find out what it is all about. I also wanted to bring some of our AP results from the high school. And I pulled our results and put them next to, or I guess above, the Massachusetts results for the 3 courses that we offer. Our U.S. history students, 100% of our students scored a 3 or higher. The mean was a 4.17, and I broke down a little further if anybody is interested to see that, we had about 37% of our students make 5s, 43 make 4s, and 20% of our students, the juniors, taking AP U.S. history in a very challenging year to take an AP course when all of our courses were semesterized. There was a long gap for a lot of students between when the course ended and when they actually took the exam. So I'm really pleased with how well this came out, with how difficult last year was. When looking at our AP European history scores, we had a mean of 3.71, 85.7% of our students scored a 3 or higher. And again, I have the breakdown on how many of our students got 5s, 4s, and 3s. And again, put it up there next to the numbers from the state of Massachusetts, which are higher than the averages for the country in the whole. And lastly, our psychology courses, our AP psychology course, we had 93% of our students score a 3 or higher, and we're looking at about 28% scoring 5s, 35% scoring 4s, and 30% scoring 3s. Again, well above the Massachusetts average, which is well above the national average. So my hat's off really to the AP teachers and the students who took a full year AP course in a semester and then went weeks and months before they actually took the exam. So we're very glad to get back to the traditional schedule where they're taking it 6 out of every 8 days, and they'll be taking it right up to the AP exam. Another piece that I wanted to talk about is the state is offering a Civics MCAS pilot exam. This is something I have been in communication with the 8th grade teachers, with the middle school principals, with Mr. Hahn a little bit, and we are in the process of opting in to this voluntary MCAS pilot program that is going to be broken down into 3 parts. The first part it's called a local performance task. It's not like really any traditional test. The students will come into class, they'll sit in their desks, they'll be given some sort of stimulus, they'll have a discussion with the class, the teacher will be guiding them, helping them have their discussion, and then they will step back and complete some sort of reflective assessment. For the pilot, this is going to be only seen by the classroom teacher. It's not something that's going to be reported out. It's really for our 8th grade teachers to learn about what the state is looking for and to see how the students do with these new tasks that they're designing and planning on rolling out at some point in the future. I don't know exactly what that timeline is right now. Then the other 2 pieces are a little bit more traditional. There's a state level performance task, which is a computer-based test, but it's not just a string of multiple choice questions. The students will have to read a passage or 2, look at a cartoon, look at some sort of image, and then answer a question based on that stimulus. The third piece, which would take place during the last month of the year, would be an end of course test. So again, we are in the process of trying to opt into this voluntary MCAS pilot, and hopefully that will take place in the next week or so, and then be implemented in March and then June, I believe is when we have for the dates for that. The Civic Engagement Project. The Civic Engagement Project, I know we know well in here, is taking place
Great stuff.
in 8th grade Civics and 10th grade United States history. Last year was the first sort of across-the-board implementation. Again, not a great year to try and do something completely new and completely different, but I really believed that last year gave us a chance to try it with low stakes, to let's see what we can do. We know the deck is stacked against us. You're having a course in a semester. You're trying to do all these other things. Let's just see what the kids respond to, what they do well, get them out. Last year we weren't getting them out in the community. We were getting them to contact people. But I think we took away a lot of positives from our experience last year that can influence what we're doing going forward. So this year, with all of our courses at the high school running for a full year and the middle school as well, we're sort of expanding what the Civics project was. But really, I look at this as year one of the Civics project. We've got a lot to figure out. We very much welcome feedback from the community. We're trying to figure out if we've got 50 different projects going on at the 8th grade and 10th grade levels, how we're going to coordinate with students, how we're going to, prevent there being duplication from one class to the next. We welcome suggestions, we welcome feedback, not only from school committee, but from other people in the community that our students are going to be engaging with. This is another of those new pieces that came along from the 2018 frameworks. I know a lot of districts decided not to do it last year, but I think our experience has put us in a position to do it even more successfully this year and going forward. And two last pieces to talk about. One was Ed Camp, which we had a couple of weeks ago, which, unfortunately with the state of the pandemic and everything had to be primarily held virtually, but we did still get a lot of good things done. Our middle school teachers worked in grade level teams to develop common writing assessment, and one of the things that they have taken away from this year's MCAS data is that there are really specific targeted things that we can do to support our students in ELA, and they've been working over the course of this year to design some writing tasks that they can see in 6th grade, that we can build upon in 7th grade and take even further in 8th grade. So they spent a lot of the day working on that. Junior teachers worked together to keep developing the U.S. and the Modern World curriculum for next year. There were some pretty significant changes to the World History II curriculum. A lot of new ideas gratefully included. So just trying to shore up our resources and ability to teach these new topics next year. And then there were just a number of sessions that when I asked the middle and high school teachers, what's a session you really took something away from that you think is really going to impact your teaching, the way that you engage with students? One was the history of Metco, which I was one of the teachers who was in that, and that's something that's specifically included in the US2 curriculum. So it's great to hear from the people who are a part of the current Metco system talk about the history, what it means, what the history of Metco means to the Metco program, so we can try to translate that passion to our students. But then also, teachers spoke really positively about creating a brave community, getting real with race and equity, integrating the history of science and political history, and then sessions on civil discourse, and then a special ed roundtable, talking about how to best serve our special ed students. And then lastly, I like to end looking ahead. One of the challenges this year has been, the lack of PLC consistency. I know Mr. Embush has been here talking about that. One of the really good things that came out of last year is we had consistent time to meet, and we got a lot of really good work, first to help us survive the challenges of last year, but also curriculum development, common assessment development, having a time to have a discussion with everybody who teaches a particular course. That was one thing that we really enjoyed last year. We are also working right now to collect resources for Black History Month, which is next month. We are trying to get some student work, both on the morning announcements and on the television in the main lobby when you walk in the high school. And so teachers have been working with students to put together like a one-slide biography that can go through on that front TV, and hopefully get some stuff on the announcements when February starts next week. The high school is looking at potential new electives. One that we've had a history of student interest in over a number of years but haven't offered would be AP Government. And then there's also, other courses that teachers are, contemplating putting together plans for, but there seems to be a real interest in AP Government. And then the middle school teachers, they've spoken excitedly about their opportunities to expand when the new middle school project is completed. Really looking for collaborative student spaces, ability to do more project-based learning, and then really excited about being in the building all together. So when we've got 8 teachers and they're in their 4 and 4 pods, collaborating across schools isn't impossible, but it's just going to be much easier when they're all together. And I know they're looking forward to that.
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. Questions or comments? Our department head. Mr. Ahern.
Just a big congratulations to you and your staff on the AP results. I think those are excellent, and it, obviously it happens in the high school, but that speaks to the development throughout. So excellent work on that.
Thank you.
Just a comment about the 8th grade civics being in its, last year was its first year. And I'm wondering if you guys track like the commonality of the projects that the students had in between the different schools even, and if there's ability to develop project teams when it's easier to gather together, because I think that helps with the execution and really making it a reality.
I think that's one thing that the middle school teachers really look forward to about when they all get together in the same space. But I think you're right, trying to see what student interests are from class to class and then from year to year, because there's always the risk that the same topic's going to come up in every class every year. That might be something that's driving them a particular year, and so I think that's a good thing to do, to start identifying what student groups and student classes have been selecting to do.
Ms. Gales, it's Mr. Breen.
I think the AP results are great. I would encourage you, we've had some discussions about AP classes in general and, trying to get more students to take AP classes, getting more students to take the AP exam. It shows that we're doing wonderfully on it, so I'm just, suggesting, as we've discussed before, that we try to get more kids in those classes, because we're doing a wonderful job when the kids are taking the test. So I would love the idea of more kids taking it, because we've done so well.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Our resident history teacher, Mr. Breen.
So one thing as well, the data shows that students that take the AP classes, doesn't matter what the subject is, even if they don't do well, they get a 1 or a 2. Those students still, and I haven't seen the research, but people have spoken of it, are still better prepared for college. And I'm just a little bit concerned that we don't want to be able to brag about our average scores if the implication is that we're weeding out students that might not help our school's average. You know what I mean? So, and I'm certainly not going to tell any teacher what their standard should be, but in terms of the culture of the school, I don't think we should be afraid of having kids that get 1s and 2s take the class too. And I certainly will, and as a matter of fact, in that sense, if we saw more kids taking the course and there were kids that were getting 1s and 2s and the school's average would go down, I'd be the first one to defend you.
Further questions or comments, Ms. Denizio and then Mrs. Gallivan?
I was curious what the enrollment was like for the new African American Studies elective, and what feedback, if any, you have received from the students who were the guinea pigs this time around.
So our initial class was small. Last year, it really didn't get into the program of studies until January, and by that point, half the kids had already finished their social studies course and didn't know to recommend or to choose it. So I believe I'm going to be in the neighborhood, we had like 10 to 12 this year. So we were only able to run it 1 semester. We ran it first semester. Those students just finished Friday. And so I will definitely cycle back to see what kind of feedback Ms. Rafferty got from those students. But I think as we have all of our juniors in their US History 2 courses this year, they'll all be finishing up at the end of the year. When it's time to make course recommendations, there'll be people they can talk to, and the teachers will be able to say, hey, this course ran, you know, it exists, there's a teacher, there's a curriculum. I'm hoping to see our numbers go up.
Well, it's not running this second semester.
We only had the numbers for one semester. So that teacher, she taught African American Studies first semester and is now teaching section of government.
So I guess that gives us an opportunity to solicit that feedback and, you know, kind of tweak things that might need to be tweaked, and just having a little bit of distance, you know, in some ways not teaching it this semester is good because it affords sort of time and space to look at, you know, how to improve it next time around, and with any luck, you know, you will have more students sign up for it.
Yes.
I like that, I think it's great that we're kind of getting into the cultural studies space in our history department. You know, hopefully this is the beginning of maybe being able to do more in that space as, you know, the years go on. But I'm excited about the possibility of AP government too. I think that would be an excellent addition to the department, and I'll just echo what my colleagues have already said about, you know, how remarkable the accomplishments of the department have been in very trying times. So thank you for your work.
I'll be sure to pass it along to everybody.
Further questions or comments? I just have Mrs. Gallivan, and then I'll have a few.
You can go.
Oh, no, please.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. This is always interesting and helpful. I was wondering, you mentioned a couple of times about contemporary issues, which are just so relevant and meaningful right now. Can you talk about, is there an opportunity in all social studies classes to integrate contemporary issues? Like, I'm thinking about, one grade is like world history. Because that's their topic, do they have to stay on world history, or do they, I mean, obviously, there are contemporary things, but I guess I wonder how constrained you are based on the frameworks compared to wanting to be able to help kids discuss some contemporary issues.
No, absolutely. It should be a part of all of our classes. You know, this year I'm teaching a class of freshmen, teaching a class of juniors, and there's always things either that you can see coming on the horizon, like I know I'll be teaching this in a couple weeks and I'll know that I'll be able to make this connection. And then there's other things that just sort of come up. And, oh, this, you know, works conveniently. I like our students to be involved and have some sort of relationship with either going out into the news media or going somewhere, either finding things they can connect, or if our students need a little bit of help, having them given something that they can read, that they can try and make connections to. So there's absolutely a space for that.
Okay, that's great. Because that's important. And I think for kids who are, you know, concerned about something that's going on in the world right now, these classes are a good opportunity to really sort of dig into it. So tell me a little bit about how do you teach kids to defend the opposing point of view? So in other words, I think that we should go down this road to solve a problem, but I understand that other people are going to be going down a different road. Like, is that built into most of the courses and the way you teach in the department?
Yeah, and I'd say that evolves pretty significantly from 6th grade through 12th grade. Whereas in 6th grade, we're a little bit more direct, right? What are the pros of this? What are the cons of this? What are the two sides? Like, list those things out. As we get closer to sophomore and junior year, we want to give them the ability to take a side and defend a side, but we also want them to acknowledge what are maybe the best 1 or 2 points that your opposition makes, acknowledge why those are good points, but still we want you to have the space to sort of find your voice defending what you believe and how you can use history and fact to support whatever your position is.
That's great.
It might be worth adding that the 2018 frameworks came with 8 guiding principles, and to your point, the guiding principle 6 was just about that. Effective history builds education, students' capacities for research, reasoning, making logical arguments, and thinking for themselves. And just as importantly, I didn't want to interrupt Mike, but principle 8, an effective history and social studies education, incorporates the study of current events in all things we do. So that is a keen and a really important, guiding principle of 2018 frameworks all the way K to 12.
Perfect, that's good, that's
And the
great.
practice standards as well. The practice standards specifically say, we want you to analyze purpose, analyze point of view, specifically distinguish fact from opinion. So again, we like to see that start with some hand-holding at the middle school, help them go through small pieces, and then, give them the ability to pull in the facts that they feel support their position.
Okay, different subject. The Civic Engagement Project.
Yes.
A couple of years now in a row, we've gotten people reaching out to us, but it's always at the end of the semester. And maybe we can schedule a time where we can meet with the students, because we've wanted to do that. It's been it's worked if we happen to have a connection with a student who has reached out. But, I think that if these projects are going to be going on an ongoing basis, if we know, like maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks before the end of the semester, when they're gathering their data, that if we were to set up a time, that might make more sense. Because it's always like the schedules don't line up at the last minute.
And last year, I can't imagine it ever being more complicated than it was last year. Those high school students, instead of having the full year to, hey, we're going to do phase 1 and then phase 2, it's like everything's happening right now, and we're done with this course in the end of January, and we're really just hitting our stride in December, and so we got to reach out to people, and it was a lot last year. I think now I've been in a couple of the 10th grade classes in the last couple of weeks where they're getting into their identifying their topics now, and they're going to be together until June. So I think there's going to be a lot more space for all of this to happen in.
That's great, that's great, thank you.
To Mrs. Gallivan's point, I think we had kind of talked about, a number of us would be very willing to, say, meet in this space an hour or so beforehand and kind of hear them out. And I think those civics and history is obviously where, the mechanism and participation of active local government brush up against that, and we're always looking for opportunities. I got the opportunity to go speak to the 8th grade at Byrd right before the Christmas break. I enjoyed it. I don't know if they enjoyed it, but it was a good dialogue. I got grilled about the masks by like five kids, but I think those are important spaces, and not just in the civics realm, but in kind of all of the allied areas in your coursework where that touches government. I think all of us would like to be available. As far as AP, I echo what Mr. Breen and Ms. Gaotz had said, but I want to point out that when you look at the data, you see AP psychology, which was a new offering, one that you came before us in this setting and advocated for just a few years ago. Now it's your biggest offering. So I would just encourage you, especially, you mentioned something that just kind of stuck in my head where there's a couple of courses that you just didn't have enough folks to run. I would encourage you to kind of find pathways, whether it be through online resources, if you have those 2 or 3 students who are interested in taking that AP World or whatever you can't physically engage in. I think that would be great, because we really want to empower folks to advance in that area. Is US still a 2-year hitch, or is it a 1-year class now?
It's a 2-year course, but the AP is broken into the sophomore year. We call it a pre-AP, US history, where they're doing the AP level work, they're reading the AP text. But the next year, when they take the course, that's the one we call AP US history.
Okay, excellent. And finally, I would just, because I'm kind of honor bound to do so, point out that 2 years from now, this community is 300 years old, and there's a tremendous amount of history swirling around that. When I was in sixth grade, one of your predecessors, emeritus teacher, Mr. Erker, threw us all on a school bus and drove us around town telling us about the history of Walpole. So anything you can do to kind of weave in, whether you've been here 10 minutes or 10 generations, it's a great opportunity to kind of talk about, when we talk about local history and national history and world history, it's always good to weave in this kind of place we call home into that if you can. So there's some exciting things coming up
Don't
there.
feel like you
I-
have to get your bus driver's license.
But-
just because
Urkel wasn't driving the bus, he was standing in it, just to be
That
clear.
makes sense. I've actually been in contact with the Walpole Historical Society that has provided both the high school and both middle schools with, I want to say, 80 years of town reports of the physical copies. So we have these libraries.
I've got my copies already, I've already got those.
So up until they went digital, we have physical copies, that will be available for our students to look at, potentially to look at the 300th year celebration.
Good stuff. Mr. Breen?
Piggybacking on what you said, no pressure, Dr. Goff, but I know at my school, King Philip, new teacher orientation, they hop on a bus and drive through the 3 towns so they can see where they're actually working and learn a little bit
You're
of
there
the
on,
history.
Mr. Hahn? I'm gonna.
Get him on a bus. Jim Murphy's driving, I'm in. Dr. Goff?
Just a couple things, just to reiterate, I agree with the, that elective AP government, I think that's a great idea. I also like the idea of taking the pilot for the 8th grade civics MCAS, not that I'm for more, testing or MCAS, but this gives us an opportunity to look at, those practice standards and especially the inquiry, since it's inquiry-based, and to see where we're at and what we need to do when we move forward. And to Nancy's point, when we're arguing in this non-defensible way, and to piggyback on what Bill mentioned, and you mentioned this, the start at 6th grade, that focus on perspective taking, so important, because that drives us right up through to the high school. And then finally, I just wanted to give you kudos on all of your hard work that you did with, with the history curriculum for the high school and trying to rework that. I mean, that was a massive undertaking with the new frameworks and those guiding principles and those standards, and to be able to have everybody at the table and working so collaboratively, and it was difficult, but it was good. It was hard work, but it was good work, and to keep it engaging and enthusiastic, and it really shows with the programs that we're able to offer at the high school, so thank you.
Well, thank you. We had a lot of good help, as you know.
Any final thoughts on history and civics? Excellent, we'll look forward to you coming back and giving us an update in the near future.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Good evening,
Take
everybody.
care. Moving on, we have our next order of new business, which is a vote on the tentative FY23 budget. It's a very momentous day. After 12 years as business manager, Mike Frischer has finally graduated to the big table. This is great stuff.
Good to see.
That's great stuff. We can add that to the budget, another $10. Very good.
Oh, my.
This is good. It's kind of late, but it's actually early. As a point of departure, every year the school committee undertakes this budget process. This year in particular, we were quite diligent, starting before the new calendar year. We had 2 workshops with our leadership team. We also had a public budget hearing. Statutorily, we were required to vote on and present a budget to the town before February the 1st, according to our charter. And this budget represents sort of the culmination of a tremendous amount of stakeholder engagement and debate amongst ourselves. But with that point of departure, I would turn it over to Dr. Goff and Mr. Frischer to introduce our FY23 school budget.
Okay, so I'll begin and transition to Superintendent Goff. So I'd like to thank you all for your support this year, the school leadership team, the select board, the town administration, the work that's gone into our budget development up to this point. This has been a collaborative effort that has culminated in a budget being presented this evening. Although we have a gap of $400,000, I'm confident that further collaboration will allow us to close the gap and fund most, if not all, of the requests on our list. I will review a summary of the proposed FY23 budget as compared to the current FY22 budget, and I will highlight the remaining gap. Superintendent Goff will review the personnel budget requests and the underlying rationale for those requests. Budget documents were provided to each school committee member and the public who attended the multiple budget workshops and meetings. Those budget documents were available at all those meetings. So in a very high level, simple sense, our FY '22 budget is $49,113,775. Our FY '22 personnel budget is $42,299,098. And our FY '23 increase to our FY '22 personnel budget is $2,803,000. That gives us an FY '23 total personnel budget of $45,102,098. Our FY '22 goods and service budget was $6,814,677, and our FY '23 goods and service budget actually decreased by $402,000. That was a major contribution by the special ed department, who was able to reduce their overall budget by $602,000, which is, I think, unprecedented at this point. So really hard work by John Quilly and his team. That gives us an FY '23 goods and service budget of $6,412,677. So our net increase overall is $2,401,000. The FY '23 total budget request with the goods and service increase and the personnel increase is $51,514,775. And that represents a 4.89% increase of our budget. Our town administrator's figure is currently at an increase of $2,599,000. So his town administrator's budget at this point is $51,114,374, which represents a 4.07% increase. And so that goes back to the gap that I referenced earlier. The gap on currently is $400,401 that needs to be closed. So I'll turn it over to Superintendent Goff.
Thanks, Mike. So if you remember at our last budget meetings, I want to just review those positions, those personnel requests that we talked about, and that are coming to the table as part of the FY '23 school department budget. And as you can see, it's in these buckets. The first is the full-day K, so that's a district-wide, and that request is to transfer the remaining teachers to the operating budget. And what that'll do is that'll eliminate the full-day K tuition and add some part-time aides to support the classes. And again, that's enrollment dependent. But what that does is it fulfills what we have set out to do in terms of multiple years, quest there to get free full-day K for our families. The second piece is special education. These positions address the growing needs of our programs and really allows us also to keep these students in district settings. So it's really important with these programs we have. And these positions are, at our Daniel Feeney Preschool, as our special education population increases, the program over at Boyden, the program over at Fisher, and then also at one of our middle schools in terms of our push-in or inclusion special ed. Third is our English Language Learner Program, or what we call our EL program, and that is an L teacher that can be a coordinator. So looking at this coordinator who also goes in and teaches, because this will help service the needs of our growing population of L students. It's an increasingly some complex educational issues. We've had some move-ins, and I've actually had several move-ins as of last week. And these students are coming in at K1 and 2 with no schooling. So you combine that on top of COVID, and you can see the increased needs. The next is just to increase the 20-hour position of our middle school MECO academic advisor to help meet the needs of our MECO students. Next has to do with STEM. So we're looking at elementary STEM teachers that really increases the focus on our literacy standards with a focus on our STEM or our science, technology, engineering, and math standards in the elementary schools. So you say, well, why with elementary? Well, then if you look on that list that you have, we also have included STEM teachers at the middle and the high school, because we know with the construction of the new middle school, it not only to have these STEM positions to help with the COVID gaps, but it really maintains the continuity of our STEM instruction, that beginning at the elementary, moving through the middle school, and continuing on to the high school. You just don't want, this at one level, and we don't have this transition between levels. We need to have this consistency. Next is looking at middle school. You just heard Mike Donahue talk about the importance of our history program, and he mentioned a lot about the middle school level. So looking at somebody, we call it a middle school humanities coordinator. For those who might know, humanities coordinator, it's an English language art and history. So what that person does is offer additional instructional leadership through analysis, through planning, through direction of departmental activities. And you can see that writing across the curriculum, not only in the English, but also in the history, which is a critical component. Middle school counseling at both Byrd and Johnson, this would be a split, not one of each. And that's to offset the increase in the counselor caseload demands, as you can see, with COVID at both middle schools. And then coming to the end for the high school, we've talked, I think this is probably the third year we've talked about the work-study program. And this is really to facilitate a new work-study program that reduces the dropout rate and from non-college bound students. And in some cases, students may have one foot in Tri-County, 1 foot in the high school, and it's really being able to keep the engagement and provide internships, both during the end of their school year, the junior or senior year, but then also summer internships as well. There's a possibility that this may even morph into, in the future, looking down the road, a night school, offering night school classes, which could be used by students, but also, adults within our, not only Walpole, but our surrounding areas. And then finally, Walpole High School English teacher, and that's to backfill a retirement that was not placed due to budget constraints. So when you look at all of this, the budget request for the personnel, it really extends our investment in education. It builds on a strong Walpole Public School foundation. It's ensuring this comprehensive curriculum that, every student is invested, every student is engaged in learning. That's why you look at that STEM and how that's so important. And every student in this district is challenged. And it also invests in strong professional development. And if you look at these requests, they're providing equitable support services and resources that are necessary for all of our children to succeed. The achievement gaps, closing achievement gaps, looking at our social emotional well-being, and also our diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then finally, this all aligns with our strategic plans and our goals for the district. So when you look at all of that, and as Mike said, I just want to reiterate what school committee is voting on. We have our total budget request of $51,514,775, which is 4.89%. The town administrator, as he reiterated, came in at $51,114,374. We have that gap of $400,000, but like Mike had mentioned, the town is continuing to work with us, and I am more than confident that we're going to, continue to work with the town to be able to close this gap. So we request that the school committee approve the total budget request for FY23 of $51,514,775.
Thank you, Dr. Goff. Just before I open up to the wider committee, I want to point out and clarify a little bit when we talk about that gap. It's a six-figure number. I think a few of us sitting around here remember seven-figure numbers with all too frequency in previous years, but it has not been static. We've had a really great partnership. We've had a number of meetings with our counterparts on the select board. Chairman Gallivan and I have been talking just about every week. Last week, a number of us observed or participated in the select board meeting last Tuesday night to kind of talk about their budget priorities as well as we try to meet in the middle. There are a number of outstanding fluid revenue streams, like Chapter 70 state aid, as well as the number from our insurer, that will help us get closer. So I think a couple of us have been meeting in small groups with subcommittees of the selectmen as well over the past month, and it's heartening that, as is often the case in the last few years, we're really all rowing together. So it's a strong place to be in, a strong footing of collaboration, but that's sort of how we take this budget under consideration in that sort of space. So with that, questions, comments, thoughts from the committee? Mrs. Gallivan.
I have a whole bunch of thoughts, actually. This is probably the biggest decision we make each year. So I think, when you look at the amount of money that we're asking for, it's just important to show the community that we spend a lot of time and put a lot of thought into this. And just from that point of view, what's happening tonight is this budget is shifting from the administration's recommendation to a school committee budget. And I'd like to call it the initial school committee budget as opposed to tentative, because I don't think there's anything tentative about this. We've done so much work to get it to this point. Realistically, each year it has to get fine-tuned based on available revenue. So that's the thing that will change between now and town meeting. But initially, this is what I would call a solid needs-based budget. We brought forward the needs that we thought were most important. And to me, the number one thing that is important to talk about is that before we do anything else, we need to provide fair compensation for our staff. And given the fact that we're so personnel heavy, like I went through the percentages, I think 7/8 of our budget is personnel this time through. That's different from every other department in the town. Nobody has that much personnel. But that means that just paying our people a fair wage consumes so much of our budget. And I think that we have to stand proud on that one, because we've got a fantastic staff here. And it's important to pay them fairly, because we put high expectations on them. And as a district, we've always been somewhat conservative in terms of funding. This budget is still conservative in terms of funding. It will still keep us below the average spending of nearby towns. It will still keep us below average, very likely, in the salary for our teachers. Yet, we need to stand up for it, in my opinion. I think so the number one thing that it accomplishes to me is fair compensation for our staff. Then, as Dr. Goff mentioned, special ed and the students that are at highest risk are served well by this budget. Full-day kindergarten, what an accomplishment to get to this point. I mean, it's just a great thing to be able to say that all of our youngest kids are starting off on a level playing field. So, that's a community celebration. And then the core academic areas that we're able to address, in particular the science, technology, math, ELA, those are things that touch every single student. So I guess what I would say is we take this responsibility very, very seriously. Before we ask for money, we look for creative solutions. We reallocate money. We don't take these requests lightly, and this is a big request. We get that. The school department's request is always the largest across the town. That's the way it is in every town. But this is a thorough budget, and it has been vetted in many directions, and I'd be proud to call it our initial school committee budget. And we'll work through the next couple months. As the chairman said, We've seen way bigger gaps than this, but this is something I'm proud to bring forward as our budget. And I think it's just important to share with the community, what it is that this budget will accomplish.
Further question, Mr. Breen?
Motion to vote in favor of the tentative fiscal year '23 budget.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Breen, second by Ms. Gale.
Can we put the dollar amount in it?
I believe we have to, yes.
$51,514,775.
Yes.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second, as slightly amended. Further discussion from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, abstained, unanimous. It is a budget. Very good. And we will continue to move through the process throughout the spring on the way to town meeting. Moving on, superintendent report. Dr. Goff, do you have anything left?
COVID was most of it. I just have a couple of things. Just wanted to let the school committee, make them aware that, you're all aware that with the contract negotiations and collective bargaining approaching, I think we're gonna try and shoot for, it's right after February break. I did file a disclosure as per, let me get this right, Section 23B3 of Ethic Law, as my spouse, Sean Goff, is an employee of the district and a member of the Walpole Teachers Association. In acting as the superintendent of schools, I'll be advising the school committee as it negotiates a new contract with the WTA. I'm disclosing that I can and will be fair and objective when performing my duty as superintendent of schools. As a non-elected and public employee, I am duly responsible to file this disclosure with you, the Walpole School Committee, and the Walpole's town clerk, which I did. In terms of Walpole, I also wanted to make you aware that, and I think we've talked about this multiple times, that we are having an equity audit done through the Walpole Public School District. Through a grant, we were able to secure this equity audit with Mass Insight Education and Research Incorporated. What they will do is, beginning by reviewing a project plan, aligning expectations around the process, the timeline, the communication, and the report, dig a little deeper into the work that's already underway in this district, and then start brainstorming about stakeholder engagement. It's very prescriptive, it's highly organized. I'll get you copies if you have not of the actual proposal of what they're gonna do. It's a pretty thick document. If you don't know about Mass Insight Education and Research, many of the surrounding districts have obtained them. I think most recently Framingham and Revere. But their commitment is really grounded on the belief that all students can achieve when they're provided with a high-quality education and support to reach and exceed common expectations. And this equity also aligns with our strategic plan goals. So I'm really excited about it. So, and that's it.
Questions or comments for Dr. Goff? I will attest to the fact that we are in receipt of your disclosure dated Jan 24th, which is also filed with the town clerk.
All right, thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Ahern?
Since it was kind of under superintendent report at the beginning, can I ask one follow-up question on the new testing
Sure.
policy? So the link was in that document that was attached
Yes.
to register. Is this a rolling registration, or is there a end date?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a rolling, we order the test kits. And, there might be a little more order there for the extra people that come on board later. So we'll have enough.
Okay.
And then, if we don't and people are late, then they will just wait until the next time. So what happens on Wednesday, I have to update any adjustments to staff. And then I think the following Tuesday, I update for students. So it's only every other week because there's 2 test kits in a packet. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further, Ms. Denizio?
I just want to comment on how excited I am about the partnership with Mass Insight. They have a stellar reputation, and they've done really thorough and well-received work in a number of communities. And there's a lot of their work that is in the public domain because when they complete their audits, they present it to the school committee. And so anybody who's interested can look that up online and see an example of the type of product that comes at the end of the audit. And I think it would be really enlightening to see just how comprehensive a product it is and what we can look forward to down the road.
And they follow us even, they follow up a year after, or 2 years after, so it's really nice.
Excellent. Further questions or comments for the superintendent? Mr. Hearn, do you have an additional word of the night for us? No? Okay. That was good. I thought that was funny. All right, moving on. Old business, COVID update is done. We have middle school building project. Mr. Chairman, please.
Yep, a few things. The building committee's meeting next week, next Tuesday. And a few things we'll be going over. Mr. Hahn and I were talking about it earlier. I'll get to that in a moment. So some of the things that will come up in terms of the movement or the refining of the plan. Sewer and water, they've been in contact with sewer and water to get the ball rolling there. They're talking about placement of fire hydrants. They're talking about parking and traffic during construction. There have been conversations with police and fire. Interior and exterior finishes, what we were talking about a little bit today, and the building committee will discuss those, like what color, and Jen, what color the building is gonna be, and what color the molding is gonna be, and what the inside, what are gonna be the colors of the tiles inside and so forth. So if you noticed on the website, everything is kind of gray, right? That's just kind of a placeholder, that's kind of neat. Community forum, we'll tentatively try to schedule one for the middle of February, and I would encourage abutters, you want to get involved in that, because we'll be talking about the East Street Road, the East Street Road. That's something worthy of people paying attention to, and you'll see updates on the color schemes. I think that's the thing that other people will be most interested in, so that it seems with each passing meeting now, for a long time, I didn't really add much, but suddenly today, there seems to be a lot of momentum, so it's neat.
Questions or comments from Mr. Breen? Ms. Gautzitz?
I just wanted to follow up and say that I wasn't quite sure how color selection was going to work in a remote setting. I mean, they put some pictures up, and I was like, wait a second, are we gonna just go by pictures? But it was very interesting that they're gonna have samples over at Town Hall. In terms of building materials, we were talking about a type of brick, and it's hard just to get a description of it, so I had mentioned I'm happy to take a field trip and go check out some buildings that actually have it on there. So there's just a lot of fun discussion, really cool, similar to the Natick school that we toured, really cool graphics that they can put on walls to add pops of color and just make the space interesting, so that you just don't have, one tone and no interest. So I was just thrilled with especially some of the stuff I saw for the interior and how they're bringing the school to life, and just something as simple as having a graphic that says art with a painting palette next to it, as opposed to just, a door. Just things like that to bring the building to life was really interesting. Pops of color in terms of curtains and the theater. It was just a very exciting meeting, I thought.
One thing as well that's been a point of emphasis is durability and maintenance of interior surfaces. That's the sort of thing you can skimp on and regret within a few years. So, that was kind of exciting as well, to know that we're trying to do it correctly on the inside.
Ms. Gautzitz?
Yeah, to follow up on that, we talked a little bit about Braintree, for instance, how we had toured, and they cut back on tile. They didn't go up the hall, so all the hallways got scuffed, and a brand-new school looked like an old school within a few weeks of kids being in their backpacks on the wall. So, you have to make tough decisions in terms of places where you can cut, and we were talking a little bit about that today, because they figured out some ways to keep tile, but it wasn't, like blow the bank kind of tile, but it'll save you money down the line in terms of maintenance. So really very fun discussions.
Anything further? Excellent, thank you for the update. I saw they were doing borings when it was 5 degrees out the other day, so
Nice.
it's coming right along. Moving on, subcommittee activity, we do have the annual tech legislative breakfast. Mrs. Gallivan, would you like to?
Yeah, this coming Friday, virtually from 9 to 11 for anybody who's available. We have confirmation already from Senator Feeney, from Representatives Dooley and McMurtry are going to be there, and I'm very hopeful that we might even get further representation, but Walpole will be represented well there. You're welcome to join if you can. I've been advocating that this is important, especially since there's no more suburban coalition, just for the suburban voice to be heard. And you know, we were always on board as a coalition to support the needs of the cities, but it's not at our expense. It's just making sure that everybody's voices are heard. So, I'm looking forward to it. They have a great lineup already set up for the morning. So if you're available, pop in. If not, we'll fill you in afterwards.
And I registered, so I'll be there.
Good.
Excellent. We do have a special ed subcommittee coming up next week as well, under subcommittee activities. Very good. Citizens' comments? Seeing none. Approval of warrants, donations, and minutes. Mr. Ahern, warrants.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the following expense warrants for the amounts listed in your packets. The warrant numbers are 222029 and 222030.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ahern, second by Ms. Denizio. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 700.
I'd also like to make a motion to approve the following payroll warrants for the amount listed in your packet. That warrant is 2228 PA.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ahern, second by Ms. Denizio. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 700. Someone like to take gifts?
Yes, I will make a motion to approve the following gifts and donations. To Boyden School from Life Touch National School Studios Commission in the amount of $1,554. To Old Post Road School from Life Touch National School Studios Commission in the amount of $2,131. To Elm Street School, Life Touch National School Studios Commission in the amount of $1,857. To Johnson Middle School, Life Touch National School Studios Commission in the amount of $1,632. To Boyden School, Box Tops for Education, December 2021 payout, $61. To Elm Street School and Johnson Middle School, Bay State Textiles and Recycling, $85. And to Walpole High School, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare Special Education donation in the amount of $500.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Denizio, second by Ms. Sarek. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 700. You want to take minutes? You can make it all in one
Sure.
motion.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the following school committee meeting minutes. From January 11th, 2022, School Committee Leadership Council Budget Workshop minutes. From January 11th, 2022, the School Committee Executive Session meeting minutes. From January 12th, 2022, the Curriculum Subcommittee meeting minutes. From January 13th, 2022, the School Committee meeting minutes. And from January 20th, 2022, the Public Budget hearing minutes.
Couple weeks.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Sarek, second by Ms. Denizio. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 700. Green.
To adjourn.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 700. Everyone have fun in the snow this weekend.
Yeah.